All right, good morning, everybody. We're going to let some time for people to log in. For those of you whom I may have never met before, my name is Miranda Jones. I'm the executive director here at the Galion-Crestline Chamber. We really wanted to do this member exclusive with the Port Authority about the Freese Center because it is going to be a pivotal moment in, Galion history. This may be the biggest project we do this decade. And obviously, the mission statement of the chamber is to promote the growth and success of our area businesses. And there's just been a lot of discussions, and we wanted to make sure that people had time to answer questions. So the format this morning, just some housekeeping. If you guys toggle the bottom of your screen, the Q&A session at the bottom is where you can ask any questions that you may want. You can also throw them in the chat if you want to, but the Q&A lets us acknowledge your question and answer it to you or allow you to speak at that point. So we are going to record this and we will make this available later. And then there is an 8 p.m. session tonight. So if out of this meeting, you may have some questions pop up, please feel free to email me those questions. So with us today are Gary Frankhouse and Chad Miller. They are both Port Authority board members. Do you guys want to introduce yourselves real quick? Just your name, who you're with, and why it's important for you to be involved in this, and then we'll dive into the questions that people asked ahead of time.
Sure, my name is Chad Miller. I function as the secretary for the Galion Port Authority. Just to echo Miranda's opening comments, I do believe that this project is both large and important to the city of Galion, and I think it's one of the larger projects that the city has tried to tackle in the last 20 years, really. So I do believe that it is very important to the continued path forward for Galion and the potential growth for the city.
Gary?
Thanks, Chad and Miranda. Gary Frankhouse. I am the vice chair for the Port Authority, also a business owner in Galion, longtime resident, and truly excited to have an opportunity to discuss with all of you today because we know there's lots of questions. There were lots of questions along this path I've been on for the last 5-6 years. And I think we've got a lot of answers. We don't have them all, but the good news is with the questions that are asked, we'll get answers to them. We've got some great resources and feasibility studies that have been done. So hopefully we get a chance to share all that today. I echo it is a big project, but I want to kind of be contradictive. It's not going to be the biggest. This is that golden domino. I'm so excited about this project. I think it's us doing something different. For how many years, having grown up in this area, have we heard, oh, General Motors could have been here. The Mansfield branch could have been here. Well, we didn't have the vision. We have the vision now. And I think that's exciting. I was recently listening to someone speak about it's important that you have that vision because there's multiple lanes that get you to that vision. And we think we've got several defined today, but there's going to be new ones that open up when this moves forward. So thank you for joining. Thank you for the questions that are going to come and your patience in getting answers if we don't have them. But hopefully we answer a lot of them today.
All right. So we did have a lot of questions pre-submitted. So we're just going to go ahead and start. If at any time you have questions, we're going to do this in 2 sections. So the first questions are going to be based on the project itself, like funding and those kind of things. The second section, those questions are going to be focused on, how does this project follow the Chamber's mission statement to promote the growth and success of our businesses? So just to get started right off the bat with the project, the first and most sent in question was, it says no taxpayer money. How is this possible?
All right, so I guess the easiest way to do this is to sort of break down our current financing plan, and it really is sort of in 2 parts. The first, and the one that we're working on with the most urgency right now, is to raise the capital necessary to actually construct the facility. So we have, a set of plans in hand and design build estimates from a contractor that puts the total cost of this project currently at around $8.5 million. So the goal is to raise those funds, obviously, and sort of check that box off so that we know that we can actually get the facility built. And I know that specific sources of funds are a question later on, and I think I'd let Gary speak to that one. But none of the current plans call for any type of current tax revenues to be directed towards the Freese Center. The money that we're asking from the foundation itself would come currently in the form of a bond issue, that the port would issue bonds. They would have to be guaranteed by the city using the annual distribution from the Freese Fund itself. So, the no tax dollars, there aren't any direct taxes being levied for this project. One could argue that obviously we're diverting funds from the annual Freese distribution that are used towards Parks and Recreation and Galion. Those aren't, by definition, tax dollars that are being utilized for this. There are no current plans to have any type of tax revenue that's either generated by the city or potentially levied by the port to be passed to support the construction or ongoing operations of the facility.
All right. We're good on that one then, right?
Okay.
All right. The next question we had was, who will run this facility?
So that is a yet to be determined answer. We have a proposal. We have received one that was something that's been received a long time ago from a company called SFA, who manages these types of facilities throughout the country. So there's a couple different options. One is we attempt to run this locally, either by hiring direct talent or having some type of operating committee that operates the facility. The second option is that we look for an experienced contractor who does this as their normal course of business and operates these types of facilities either throughout the state of Ohio or nationally even. So those are our two options. They're still out there in discussion. That has not been determined yet.
If I could just piggyback on that, I wanted to make reference. Chad said SFA, that stands for Sports Facility Advisors. That is a group out of Clearwater, Florida, that basically has put together the 32, 36-page pro forma, the operating statement that we've been basing a lot of our decisions on. They have a sister company by the name of SFM, which stands for Sports Facility Management, that in the operating costs, they've given us an idea of what it would be to basically have them on board, where we could actually source talent ourselves and they would be hired by SFM. So that we would have the expertise of the group that basically created the pro forma, and then the group also that would potentially management. So that's one of the options I think Chad just said, but I wanted to make sure everybody understood the two groups. And it's also really important to note that Tom and I actually hired that group to do the work, because it went back to the original feasibility study that was done, which was to determine if from a market standpoint, we could even sustain a facility like this, which came back, yes, it was. And then we were directed from their director, Don Schumacher, with the National Association of Sports Commissions, to SFA. And then SFA, they've done $1 billion worth of these projects around the country. They currently manage, because I just had a call with them last week, I can't remember if it was 10 or 20 projects where they've done something similar, like they've done the fiscal planning and then they're running the facility. And I had that discussion because of the whole COVID situation that we've just been through. And that wasn't a question listed, but if we want to get to that later on, I've got some good information to share. But it's really important to understand that group, because they're really the basis, I think, for the confidence that Chad and I have and the port has for even having this discussion and moving this project on. So.
All right, thank you. Next question is, what is the average yearly operating cost predicted to be?
Gary, I'll let you take this one.
Okay, so I just referenced that SFA document, and I'm going to flip a couple pages here because I have it in front of me. I will tell you that that number is $765,675. That's the 5-year average, which is determined on page 9 of that report. So basically, one of the things you have to remember when I give you that number, though, is pro formas are educated guesses from people with experience in the field, which is SFA. I think pro formas are built conservatively. Revenues are usually underestimated and expenses are usually overestimated. And when it comes time to get into the detail, I think that's where there's negotiations that happen. There's costs that are considered and hopefully reduced on the expense side. As I said, I think they're built conservatively. But if you look at this pro forma, that's the operating costs.
And that operating cost again, Gary, I'm sorry.
So, well, let me tell you what it represents. It
Okay.
represents facility expenses, operating expenses, management, payroll, and benefits. And the average over the 5 years was 765,000 some odd
Per
change
year.
per year. Yep.
Okay. The next question is, who will be allowed to use this facility?
Anybody is our vision. What that looks like obviously still needs to be determined from an operations standpoint, and that's going to be dependent upon a little bit to the previous question on who we choose to operate it. But we do foresee allowing anybody really to use this. So I think this is one of the best things about this facility. One of the biggest pros. Okay, so obviously we would like to see this facility generate revenue so that it can eventually pay for itself, and that is the real driving force behind that is going to be travel sports. All right, but speaking from the perspective of a lifelong Galion resident and someone who has small children, their activities a lot of times are hindered by the lack of space that we have currently available for the youth in Galion. So my son currently practices soccer at like 8 or 7 o'clock on Friday evenings at Grace Point, and it's wonderful that Grace Point makes their facility available for that. But I'm not sure 7 o'clock on Friday evenings is the best time for kids to be practicing. So when I coached 3rd grade basketball, it was the same deal. We were practicing at 8 o'clock at night at the primary school. So my 3rd graders' bedtime at the time was like 8:30. So that's just kind of crazy things that go on. But I think for youth sports in Galion in particular, that it's a huge win, because they will have facilities be able to practice not only in season, but they can also practice out of season, because they'll have a nice, safe, enclosed space to do so. Additionally, we have built in a walking track for the facility, and we envision allowing residents obviously to come out there and use it. But the final determinations of when those things will be available, have yet to be made. But we do envision everyone being able to use it.
And that goes right into the next question then, which is, will it be free then for Galion or Crawford County residents to use?
Miranda, could we just back up real quick? I wanted to
Yeah.
add something to Chad, because he did a great job of highlighting the travel sports, but I want to talk about alternative events. We had some renderings from early on with some grants that we had received as it related to, for example, Ohio Mutual over in Bucyrus. Large corporation. The only place they can gather all their agents and their staff is in Columbus, because there's not even a venue, even in Mansfield, that's big enough to host and hold all those individuals. Well, we could easily do that in this facility. So I was also talking with a former director of the Lima Event Center. Graduations became a huge thing for them, generating $6,000 to $7,000 of rental revenue, because the local area high schools were using it. And in our case, I've had some recent discussions with OSU Mansfield. I know with their facilities over there that aren't even air conditioning. So there's, as I said when we started this conversation, we have an end destination with multiple lanes. There's multiple revenue streams that could be even added to what was included in the SFA document. So I think that's encouraging.
Okay, so that'll lead then to the question about, will it be free to Galion residents or Crawford County residents to use then?
Again, that's another item that's being discussed. So I think there's a difference there. I think that's two different constituencies, Galion and Crawford County. So a lot of that is going to depend upon, I believe, source of funds. So obviously the city is, if they approve of the financing proposals, are making a large commitment. And part of that commitment is funds from the Freese Foundation that would normally be used for park and recreation. So in my mind, you know, it does make a whole lot of sense to consider allowing Galion residents to use this facility without a charge, because obviously, you know, some of that money that would normally be diverted to parks is getting spent on the Freese Center. You know, where I think it gets a little bit trickier is, you know, how do we handle some of the youth sports activities and, you know, gym rentals, things like that. You know, I think that from a feasibility standpoint, there's going to have to be some give and take there. So, you know, Galion Youth Baseball needs to rent the facility for 2 nights a week in the spring. There might have to be some type of small charge that's assessed there, or, you know, same thing, maybe youth basketball or volleyball. There's going to be some items that there's going to be carried charge for, but, you know, in no means do we you know, anticipate, hey, if I want to go out there when we get 8 inches of snow and take a walk, are you going to charge me to do that? No, we're not going to do that. There's no plans for that. You know, from a Crawford County resident standpoint, you know, I think that does depend upon whether or not any of the other entities in Crawford County are able to contribute funds towards either the construction of the facility or the operations budget. You know, in my mind, if the county does commit some type of, you know, either tax revenue or other revenues towards the facility, then I think that's something we definitely need to consider.
Right. Thank you on that one. The next question we have is, what money has been raised for this project to date?
So I will take that one and share kind of where we are to date. It started with the state capital bill, not the most recent one that was passed, which should have been passed first of the year, but ended up happening in December of 2020. We were not included in that funding. We requested funding, but we didn't receive it. And I think part of that was because we had received the funding the previous biannual capital bill funding, which at the end of, I guess it was May or June of last year, we were able to get an extension on it to use that money. So those of you that have been out and know where the proposed site is, you've seen the trees cleared, some of the costs that we've incurred for the criteria architects that have led us to selecting a contractor and have gotten us into the design phase. We've been using that money, and that was $500,000. We also received a grant from the Community Foundation for Crawford County, which is $50,000 per year for 10 years. So that's $500,000, and we've received 2 of those draws so far. And then we received money from the Timken Foundation, which is $200,000 per year. So that's 1.2 that we've raised. And just to take a step back, I think that's a pretty impressive list of contributions. So we've got state support, we've got regional support with out of Canton, Akron, and Timken, which is locally involved here in Bucyrus. And then, you know, obviously the county from the Community Foundation support. So we think we've taken some good strides. I think the freeze funding is crucial to the rest of the funding sources. I mean, obviously this is in Galion. Obviously Galion was chosen because of the will and the giving capacity of the Freese family, which I think is a tremendous asset for us. So when we ask for $5 million, I think it really tips us and opens up more channels for investment by businesses locally, businesses regionally, and it brings new players into the community too. So it's exciting.
All right, thank you. The next question is, what happens if we don't get the funding from the Freese Foundation for the project?
Well, that's a pretty easy one. If we don't get the funding from the Freese Foundation, either one of 2 things happens. We go back to the drawing board and try to find $5 million somewhere else, or the project doesn't happen. I mean, that's That's the long and short of it. This is the linchpin that I think will drive this project to completion, because there really isn't another source of funds for that large of a dollar amount out there.
The next
And can we
question.
just pause for a second,
Yeah, no
Miranda, because someone submitted a Q&A. Gary,
Okay.
could you repeat the Timken Foundation commitment, please?
It was 200,000, which we received that money. It was 100,000 last year and 100,000 the year before.
The one last time for me, because I'm sorry, I didn't catch it. The Timken Foundation commitment was what?
200,000.
Okay.
And that happened over a 2-year period, which has been completed.
Okay. The next question is then, can the design be changed to add additional sports or square footage, such as in conversations that I've had with people, people are like, well, why isn't there a pool in the rendering? Why aren't there batting cages for baseball or softball? So is the design set in stone, or can changes still be made?
So I'll go ahead and jump in there, Chad. I want to take a step back because I've seen a lot of questions as it relates to pools, ice. As I mentioned at the beginning, we've had some very credible groups involved in the market studies. And the very first study was the National Association of Sports Commissions. And we were told right out of the gates that if you want to make this project successful, initially, do not look at water and ice. Now, that is because it's difficult to raise the money necessary to even build what we're talking about, obviously. Thus, we're having this discussion. But then the costs to operate from an energy standpoint is pretty significant. So it makes it very difficult. Now, that doesn't mean that the right situation doesn't present itself and it can be a long-term vision. And I think that's really important to note, because the reality is you always are trying to think with the end in mind. I could very well see a pool. I could very well see ice. I mean, I would love to see it all, outdoor fields. But the reality is we got to start where we are. First things first, and that is the turf and the hard courts. Now, there are batting cages, Miranda.
Oh, okay.
And things like even golf simulators are not discussed at this point, but could be put in there because those don't really require the square footage. We have the square footage where cages can be lifted up into the rafters, and that's what's happening. And golf simulators can be placed, can be moved in and out. So I think we're always open to ideas, but ultimately, there's even plans to potentially expand with the turf side. We think that in the area of 60 miles, there are no indoor turf facilities. Heck, I just had a call yesterday. One of our neighboring communities is considering building a indoor turf facility. I don't know how accurate that is. I got to follow up on it, but there's a desperate need. I mean, right now you have to go to Medina or Columbus, and that includes all of Richland County, Wyandotte County, Marion County. So, I think that one turf field isn't enough, but we've actually designed it with outdoor space that could be added to if the pro forma and the plans work as we expect them to work.
Wonderful. Thanks, Chad. Did you have anything or?
No, obviously we welcome the input. I think that we've done a lot of work to get the design to where it's at today. And the vast majority of that, to Gary's point, has been driven on cost. Some of the questions that we've gotten around an auditorium is, whether it's 4 lanes, 8 lanes, 25, 25 yards or 50 yards, 2 meters, whatever they do the pool length in. I mean, you're talking, you're gonna expand the cost of this facility by at least half. Okay, so we ballooned from a $8.5 million project to a $13.5 to $15 million project, and I think that's just, it's not doable at the moment. So yeah, I think someone else asked a question here about impact on the Galion YMCA, and I think that another important aspect of this, without the swimming, there that's one less direct area of competition, and we don't really see this facility supplanting or competing directly with the YMCA in any way, shape, or form. Yeah, there's going to be a little bit of overlap, but YMCA is still going to have all their youth programs. I mean, when my kids went through those programs, those gyms were full every night anyway. So it's not like there was a lot of extra time there either for folks to rent gym space, things like that. As far as the other sports go, we do have batting cages included. I think there's the possibility to, include even more, especially on that turf side. I think that, the possibility of including, wrestling is a big one too. I know that the schools are looking at trying to expand wrestling facilities in Galion, and I think this is another opportunity where, we don't have, for example, wrestling mats in the budget currently, but if that's something that the schools wanted to partner with us on, there's definitely room there for that. So I think there's a lot of opportunities to kind of expand upon the services that we already foresee this facility being used for.
I just reiterate those venues. I mean, my kids grew up at the Mid-Ohio Gymnastics over in Marion, and I've talked to their owner about, renting the facility out, and they bring in their own equipment, and it just becomes a venue rental. So it really becomes unlimited to those type of ideas.
Okay. The next question is, why was this specific location selected? Why is it being built where it is?
Well, because we got the land for free. I mean, that's one of the big things. It was a question that's also asked on the Q&A too. So this land was originally gifted or given to the city of Galion as part of a sort of an overall another project. I think that was part of the Valero and hotel development. And then the city turned and then gifted that property to the port as well.
Okay.
So it's a big cost savings. We don't have to go out and buy land.
And I would add, I think there was a little more maybe effort by myself and Tom to meet with Mr. Niss. I know for me, with my marketing, it was always location, location, location. And let's face it, look, US 30 is the asset for not only Galion, but Crawford County. And we have to build on that. And the number of people, and I think it's around 15,000 that go past that intersection every day. And those aren't just local people. And this isn't a local, just a local facility. It is definitely a local facility, but for the attention that it can grab, and for someone driving from the Canton area or the Van Wert area to recognize this and get online and try to discover what that is and what we do. I mean, it's going to be much better here than in what I will call the sister venue down in Coshocton, which this facility is very much modeled after. It's in the middle of nowhere, and people don't just come upon it. We have a chance for where this is located for people to just come upon it. And that leads to additional revenue or securing the revenue that we've projected. So definitely the fact that it was free, but we want to thank Mr. Niss for the fact that he owned the property and he was open to the ideas. Yes, we made an investment as a community. The city has invested in that gift. Go back to the free question. I don't know anything in life that's ever been free. It's just, where is the money coming to pay for the free? So I think the city's been invested in this project through Mr. Niss's gift. He's benefited from the gift, and hopefully we're going to benefit from the gift and the economic development that comes from it.
Okay, and then what was the value of the land?
Well, I based that, Miranda, on the Valero sale that happened right after. I think that sold for around $125,000 an acre. I'm not saying that should be the market rate, but we got 6.682 acres. So I call it about $780,000 worth of value in the land.
Okay. Next question is, what, if funding comes through, what would be the projected opening date of the facility?
Well, if we can get construction started this year, we're looking at a late summer, early fall open. I think that was the original plan. That could be delayed a little bit. We had perhaps expected or anticipated maybe the construction financing piece to be a little bit further than it is right now, and that's okay. It's good to take our time and make sure we iron everything out. But that the original sort of forecast from the design build team had the facility opening next fall, so the fall of 2022. Yeah.
Awesome. So I'm going to jump ahead of one question for you guys. Who will actually own the facility?
The Port Authority.
So the Galion Port in its entity of its,
Yep.
And is it a 501c or is it?
No, we are a government entity.
Okay. And then after that, so what happens? We live in a world with a lot of people who are pessimistic and naysayers. So let's say we get this open. Let's say we go through and the projected revenue isn't there. What happens if it doesn't make it? What happens if all these projections are way off?
Well, thank you for leading in with the question the way you did. My entrepreneurial spirit, like I don't even consider this. However, I got to be a realist, and it is a good question. And when we initially had the National Association of Sports Commissions in, we did a trip to Cincinnati and went to several venues. And one of the things that I took from it, Tom was along with me on that ride, and I think he would say the same thing, is that, and the Spire up in Cleveland area, what tends to happen is someone buys the facility for exactly what we're using it for. They buy it at a reduced cost and it cash flows better. So I think that it goes into the future functioning in this capacity. It could be different ownership if you're taking a pessimistic look at it or a non-entrepreneurialistic approach, but I don't even see that happening. There's such a demand. There's so many lanes of revenue that are open to us. We've got to run it as a business. So we need to do that. But, I think it goes into the future functioning in this same capacity. But if that weren't to happen, I mean, you have an amazing asset that I just mentioned, how Ohio Mutual can't find facilities, an event center, something along those lines. It would be adapted. I mean, I watch a lot of these commercial real estate guys take former box ideas and convert it to Ashley furniture locations. It can be done. We don't want to do that. I think we're onto something much bigger than the future of retail and the commercial market. So this is a little more of a recessionary proof industry, and maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that shortly.
I'm going to go to some of the questions that were asked now, because the part one questions that we had ahead of time are in. So the first question in the Q&A is, how much is the estimated annual endowment distribution from the Freese Foundation to the city of Galion?
So I will attempt to answer this question to the best of my ability, with the caveat that I am neither a Freese trustee board or nor do I am an expert in those distributions. But the way it has been explained in a general sense to the Port Authority is that the city receives a 5% distribution annually from the fund based upon the fund's overall invested balance. So one of the reasons why we chose this financing structure is what we would be asking the foundation to do is actually purchase all of this debt. So all of the bonds that the port is going to be issuing would be directly purchased by the foundation. It's going to do two things. One of the most important is it keeps that overall fund value flat, if you will. Obviously, there's still going to be investment gains and losses from the other investments that the fund has, but it's going to be a net zero effect on the fund balance as of today's date. So basically, they take $5 million, liquidate other investments that they have, and purchase these bonds. What that has the potential to do then is to keep those distributions at the same levels they are today. Again, obviously there's some market fluctuation there, but keep those distributions at the same level they are today, which has the potential to both keep the city whole from their distribution, and as importantly in my mind, also keeping the school district whole for their distribution, because of that 5%, it gets broken out into eighths, and 1/8 of that money gets directed towards the schools, which they use for scholarships, and 7/8 of that money stays with the city for parks and recreation projects. So by structuring the financing this way, it can keep that fund balance intact. So it's not a liquidation where you're going to end up taking a 40% haircut theoretically in your distribution annually.
that'll take me to the next, one of the other questions coming in is the debt service included in the pro forma annual expense of that 765?
Gary, you want to take that one?
So there is a portion of the annual average that is covered there, based on about that 3%. To take out anything more than that is not part of the pro forma.
Next question, what is the estimated total cost of the design and engineering plans, net of the grant from the U.S. Department of Ag?
So this is a little difficult because I'm not sure I completely understand the question, but we're gonna do our best. So Gary, correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe that there was a grant received from the U.S. Department of Agriculture that they're referencing here that was used for the original rough designs of the facility and some storyboarding, things like that. And I don't know if you used that for the pro forma or not, Gary. Was that part of that?
That money was used for most of the due diligence, the wetlands, the environmental, the cultural studies. It was also used to get some preliminary design and engineering done. And that it was about 57,000 for that, came from the USDA. And then, that now we're in the design phase with JNF.
Yeah, so the second piece of that then I would say is we took those initial designs, the Port Authority did, and we went out and received, I don't know if you can call them bids, but we received proposals from, I think ended up being 12 design build teams and I guess design build architect teams that came up with a set of renderings for the port. We ended up with a firm called MSA. I believe their home office is out of Cincinnati, but they did what we call criteria architect designs for us. That cost was roughly $40,000. I think it was a little bit less than that, all totaled up. So, but they gave us our preliminary designs without a lot of detail, but just incorporating a lot of the design features and usages that we wanted for the facility that these design build firms could then base their proposals on. Through that process, we ended up with a team headed by JNF out of Bucyrus. Their architect partner is SPGB Architects. Hopefully I got the acronym in the right order. They are currently in the process of, finalizing or really honing in those designs. And so the total cost, which is part of the $8.5 million, just so everybody is aware, for that design piece is around, I believe the final number is around $290,000. So as far as the question goes, I think part of that question was around the ag grant. So the ag grant isn't paying for any of that additional design. Currently, we have funds appropriated from the state capital bill to pay for that design piece, if you will.
Next question, and this one has a couple of different components to it, so I'll take it one at a time. So how will the operations, maintenance, and utilities be paid for until it becomes a self-supporting business, we'll say?
So that's going to be that second piece that we sort of mentioned earlier. We are, planning to raise that capital. Obviously, we need to fine tune the pro forma and, make some tough decisions about who we want to operate the facility and what those operations are going to cost. But I think we have a good general ballpark from the pro forma we already have. But the idea is to obviously raise those funds from donations or other sources of funds. And Gary, could you speak to a little bit more about to where we're at with that?
Well, I kind of hinted at it. We think it's about $1 million in pre-opening costs, which include things like you hire people 9 months in advance of the doors opening. You have to start booking tournaments, so those costs are covered within that. The first 3 years, the facility is projected to lose money. In the first year, it's expected to lose about $149,000, then it goes to about $91,000, and then it's $4,000. And then it makes monies in years 4 and 5, And then years 6 through 10 average, I think it's around $112,000 of net profit. And then years 11 through 20, it's around $170,000 in net profit. So those first 3 years of losses are a part of that $1 million that we're looking at as operating costs on the initial costs of opening the facility, both construction, operating, and then infrastructure is another point we need to talk about.
Next question was, if the stock market does not produce the expected return, will the city be responsible to make up the difference?
So that's a very good question, and I think that's one of the reasons why we're taking some additional time to take a look at this financing plan. So one of the other things that the Port Authority has done is we've reached out to and contracted a municipal advisor from Columbus by the name of Michael DePerna, who has an immense amount of experience in public finance. I mean, he puts these types of deals together on a much larger scale, but he's been working with us too, but he put these types of deals together. And part of that is he's actually, drafted some models for us based upon, returns that the fund would receive. So, projecting good years, projecting okay years, projecting bad years from a return on investment perspective and what that looks like. I think the key question here is this is where there's going to need to be a lot of cooperation between the port, the city, and the Freese Foundation, because we need to make that determination as to whether or not the city would be still able to take their 5% draw. If the city is able to still take their 5% draw from the fund, regardless of returns, it becomes unlikely that the city would have to come up with other cash to support any of the debt service. Now, it's not that it's not possible. I mean, anything's possible, right? But it becomes unlikely that eventuality would happen. In other words, that the draw the city takes should, in the vast majority of cases, be enough to cover the debt service. The other piece of this that we haven't talked about is, there is going to be a debt service agreement, I guess you want to call it, I don't know what the technical name would be, between the Port Authority and the City of Galion as part of this financing proposal. So Gary mentioned years 1 through 3, obviously, if we're operating at a loss, there isn't any money there to support any debt service from the facility itself. But after year 6, when there is a sizable amount of return that's being generated, the port and the facility itself will start contributing to the debt service of the facility. So the city's obligation is going to be reduced over time, when this facility becomes successful and starts generating revenue.
The last question in this was, will the center be free for residents? And we did answer that earlier. So last 2 questions coming in, and then we'll move to the second part. So what is the target for donations amount from private individuals for the capital campaign? Do we have a number yet?
You want to take a swing on that one, Gary?
I'm sorry, I missed the question. Say it again.
What is the target for donations amount? Like, what if you were doing a capital campaign from private individuals? What would be the number you would set as your goal to raise?
I think $1 million is what we've drafted out.
Okay.
Now that assumes that the other things that we've included in that come to fruition, meaning county involvement, meaning donors from the turf and hard court side. But if all things can fall in place, I think $1 million is the number.
The next question, I don't know if we can, are you at liberty to disclose the current market value of the Freese Foundation?
Well, I don't think we're at liberty, and I don't know that I would even have an accurate number. So I think we should let that one go, unfortunately.
All right, we're going to move on to the second part. And so, like I said in the beginning, the mission statement of the chamber is to promote the growth and success of our area businesses. So how is the Port Authority going to partner with uptown businesses to create a marketing collaborative where those in the uptown business district can help contribute to resources and market themselves within that center.
Let me jump in there.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead, Gary?
So I think one of the things that's most appealing about the Freese Center is the economic development impact that happens as a result of, on the conservative side, 25,000 people coming to our community. On the high side, that could be 40 to 50,000. And when these people come to our community, they are going to look for things to do. And I think our downtown offers a tremendous opportunity. When I think of what we even have uptown in terms of some of the specialty retails, but even branding the community. You know, we have the distillery, the winery, the brewery, a spirits district. I so often listen to WQEL and hear Jim Sprang talk about the financial district of Bucyrus, and whether you think it's Wall Street or not, it really grabs your attention. And I think Galion has that same ability with the spirits district and tying in with the theater. What a tremendous asset. And those types of things are right up the alley of what people attending the venue would seek. And then with that happening, then you have the specialty retailers that are supported by that traffic that's coming uptown. So, I mean, I think it's going to be part of our job as a community to also market within this facility. Like so many people have said to me, how does this facility truly benefit Galion housing? Well, let's just say we put up marketing information about the CRA. And I'm hoping most of you know about the CRA, but the community reinvestment area, where if you build a new house within city limits, you can abate 50% of the property taxes. What a tremendous place to get that messaging out and have the connection to realtors and developers. The port, for example, one of our other projects, we're not just Freese oriented. We just acquired the Wrenchville property with intents to develop that into a subdivision. So, the goal here is for this to be a catalytic project. It's not just about sports travel tourism. It's about healthcare. It's about post-secondary education, being able to entice, OSU Mansfield or OSU Marion to use this facility as a venue. It's about creating housing, and with housing comes people, and with people comes industry. So we develop industrial parks off of this. It truly is a catalytic project. So I know the question was specific to downtown, but I think there's lots of opportunity for downtown, and we've got some very great entrepreneurial minds in the downtown of Galion that I've been talking with already. So I think there's a tremendous upside.
Well, and that gets me to, I'm going to skip ahead a question for you guys. So how well represented are the uptown businesses or businesses in Galion on the Port Authority board? So I guess maybe go into who is the makeup of your board.
Yeah.
And I mean.
Yeah, so that's a good question. That's not, unfortunately, I don't know, fortunately, unfortunately, I don't know what you want to say there, but that's not we don't have control over that. So the Port Authority board, there are 7 members, and they are all appointed by the mayor and then approved by council. So currently we have Gary and myself. We have Eric Kent, Rod Steiger, Deborah Garvick, and I believe, and Chanel Hip. So those are our 6 board members currently. We do have one opening, which I believe the city is looking to try to fill next week at their council meeting. So, but those are the current port board members. What I would say is that, we are still a relatively new organization. We just finished our first full year of operations. But we are, I think, always looking for, at least in my mind, maybe I'm speaking out of turn here, but I'm always looking for that participation. So our meetings are all public meetings. They're held on the second Tuesday of the month at 9:30, usually at Pizza Hut right now for social distancing standpoint. But we would love the community to come, even uptown businesses, and participate, share their ideas. We also have, I believe, moving into 2021, some opportunities for, volunteering on committees that would serve the port. Gary and I have talked about this, and I think we've talked about this at some of our board meetings too. We get this facility built. The port's got a lot of other projects that we want to look to try to accomplish. So the port board itself isn't probably the right vehicle to manage this facility, if you will. So there's going to have to be a separate committee or separate board that we nominate and choose to help us run this facility, to kind of oversee it. And I think that's a great opportunity for uptown business owners to be involved. But I think when it comes to that marketing standpoint, so once, we're really into sort of design, finance it, and finance the operations discussion. But once we get, once we get to that marketing piece, which we're also efforting through some, getting some proposals for some marketing studies, I think that's important that we start to look at that and really start to lay the foundation and the plan. And we would welcome the participation of uptown businesses.
Okay. So what could the uptown businesses to do to support this project moving forward?
Well, I think if you're in support of the project, if you feel like this is a good idea and it's something that we should pursue, make your voice known. I'm a believer in this project, mostly through exposure. Just to be completely honest with everybody that's listening right now, I think Gary and I first had a conversation about this project over lunch 4-ish years ago. And, at that time, though, it was like $15 million. So, well, I'll preface it with that. But, I was no way is this going to happen. $15 million, how are we going to do that in Galion? But the more I've been exposed to this and the more that, I've got to participate in the process, the more I truly believe this is a tremendous opportunity to the community. So if you are in support, get involved, speak your mind, let those who are making the decisions know that you support it. Attend a meeting, come to share your voice at the meeting, reach out to me or Gary or any of the other board members and, see what we might be able to do to get you involved in the project. I think that, the more hands we have working on this, the better.
Okay. So how committed is the Port Authority to putting Galion businesses first when it comes to marketing or promoting to the visitors within the center? So you're going to have a lot of out of town people coming in. So how are we going to, work with, our already businesses here?
That's a very great question. So I think that's part of that maybe third step marketing plan. What are we going to do there? Some of my initial thoughts, we've had a lot of discussions around concessions and opportunities that might be there for visitors. It could be something as simple as, reaching out to, I got my Becca House coffee here this morning. Simple as reaching out to Becca House and saying, hey, do you have a coffee cart you can bring there on Saturday mornings or Sunday mornings when we have these tournaments? Or, maybe there's a space that we could have, other retailers represented there. I think that there's a lot of opportunities there for uptown businesses. I think that part of this is, having those materials available, having some type of strategy that when a out of towner walks through the door, because they're going to get off at 30 and they're going to come in the doors of this facility. What do we have displayed there? What do we have available to people to let them know what's in Galion? And I think that's very important. I would say we are 100% committed to trying to develop a plan that works for everybody there. There's going to be runoff. There's going to be people that are going to go to Ontario or Bucyrus to stay or eat or whatever you might have you. But this is the kind of the starting point. And I think that's one of the key reasons we're building we want to build this facility.
Awesome. And I know most of the projected is 26 weekends with full tournaments. And so when those tournaments come in, they're mostly Saturdays and Sundays, right? So if
Yes.
you go to Uptown Galion on a Sunday, most businesses aren't even open or they close early. Is that something that we need to start, having that conversation with our businesses that, hey, this is a tournament weekend. You may see
Yes.
an influx of people in the
Mhm.
uptown area, so you might need to extend your hours and open an extra day.
Absolutely. I think that's part of it. I think, unfortunately, we can't control that piece. That's when parents and kids are available for tournaments. But I think that's something that we obviously need to work with the chamber on and with the uptown businesses, all businesses in Galion, really, whether they're uptown or not, to say, hey, this is our schedule. This is when we're having a tournament. This is how many teams are coming. This is how many people we expect to be in town. So, then the business owner can make the decision, hey, is it worth it for me to open up the extended hours, pay someone to be there. I understand operate it. There's all those costs that are involved there, but that way, a solid, sound decision can be made as to whether or not, that it's viable for them to do that.
What are the projected revenues to local businesses? I mean, Galion in particular, do you guys know that?
I've got an aggregate number I could share. There's actually a video out there that I referenced $1.9 million of economic impact, which is that impact on our local businesses. But that ranges all the way up to $2.9 million. I can't speak specifically to a business or sector, but I think that that impact, direct and indirect, gives you some basis of what we should expect. And I should also say that's all expected on 26 weekends. I think I mentioned earlier the Coshocton relationship that I have with Kids of America down there, and I talk closely with Isaac Bush, who's their director. They're pushing 40 plus weekends a month. And I think that's realistic. I think 26 weekends, once again, is conservative, which makes me feel even more confidence in that pro forma, because I think it's more like 40, which is even more economic development impact. I have a spreadsheet that shows the number of hotel stays for those events, whether it's volleyball, whether it's basketball, or whether it's alternative uses. And it's going to have a significant impact on the community.
Yeah,
I had
there's
some
a
questions.
question on here too, Miranda, about the overnight beds. So I
Okay.
think since Gary mentioned that, it'd be a good time to address that. So yeah, the pro forma and these projections show that there will be a significant need for overnight beds in Galion. So what we have currently available will not fit or meet that need. So absolutely, the Port Authority, in partnership with the city and chamber, would be looking to try to find a way to fill that need. Obviously, that's going to be dependent upon some outside investment for somebody who is willing to take, that entrepreneurial risk to build another hotel or expand the hotel that's there. But there is definitely a need in the studies, and I think that's something we definitely would be looking at.
And just to kind of give you an idea of the detail, like this is a sample schedule for year 5. And on weekend number 6, the first weekend in February, if this were up and going, we would have a large venue and we'd need 1,008 room nights for that weekend. So that kind of gives you the idea of the plan that we have to work with once we pass this first step of committing to the construction, getting through to the operations piece. So.
Okay, we're getting really close to 10, and I don't know if Zoom's going to cut us off. I've got questions coming in, so I'm going to keep asking. If it cuts us off, I'm very sorry. Submit me your questions and we'll email you back answers. Or we're doing this again at 8 o'clock tonight. So you can always register for the evening event as well. Another question that came in was, since the utility bill is used for questionnaires, will there be a way to reach the residents that do not get a paper bill in the mail?
So yes, the only thing I would say here is I don't know if the survey is still available. I'm not sure what they put the cutoff date on that, but the survey was available, or a link to the survey was also available through the city's website. So you can go to the City of Galion's website, and there was a link to the Freese Center survey there. So even if you didn't get a paper utility bill, you can go ahead and get on there and complete it. I'd also tell you, if the questions were very basic. It was, do you understand what we've talked about today, and do you support it, yes or no? So if the survey is not available and you want your voice heard, I believe all the contact information, because the survey was generated by the city. Okay, so I think all the contact information for council people or council persons are there as well. You could send them an email. I think most of them have their email address published. But Doc Fellner said, you go ahead and contact your council person, just be nice. And I'll tell Doc Fellner I always try to be nice, even when he's performing my dental cleaning. So.
Thank you. Another question we had in, going back to the construction, will local contractors be used?
That is an absolutely yes answer. And that is one of the reasons why we picked J&F as our design build contractor. Part of their proposal had very specific quotes from local contractors. So contractors in Galion. For example, correct me if I'm wrong here, Gary, but for all the HVAC work, I know that they had reached out and discussed the planning with Fox Plumbing. For the electrical systems, they had reached out and discussed the plans with Carter Electric. I'm sure there's other ones I'm forgetting. Gary, can you help me out here?
I mean, those are the biggest costs right there. I mean,
Yeah.
electric and HVAC. So, and both of those were contacted and provided pricing.
Plus, I know it's not Galion, okay, but J&F also performed the largest percentage of their work, okay? So from a actual construction standpoint, that presents an enormous cost savings because they're not hiring another contractor to do a lot of the work. I forget what their percentage was, but their percentage of work completed was extremely high. And so with that too, it's not Galion, but it's still Crawford County. You know, J&F employs people in and around Crawford County, so that's going to go also stay local as well.
All right. I had a question come into me via email. Could someone clarify the cost of debt servicing over the first 4 or 5 years? And is that the city of Galion's responsibility?
Yes. So the proposal we have is that these bonds will pay a 3.5% coupon or yield. So part of that, I guess, is interest expense, but part of it's also, you know, you think about amortization of your mortgage, for example. So every year you're making principal and interest payments on this debt. So you can think of it like you have a 20-year mortgage on your house. That's what we're asking for, is a 20-year bond. So I believe those projections, I don't have them in front of me, but I believe those projections are about $350,000 a year is what those payments are. So 175 a half. So yes, with this proposal, the city would use its Freese contribution to pay that debt service. Those would be due semi-annually to the bond. So it's basically going back into the Freese Foundation, if you will, but that's guaranteeing a 3.5% return on that $5 million for the Freese Foundation.
Okay. This question came in via email as well. Who will be liable for any injuries that happen at the facility?
Hopefully our insurance company. But I mean, it's just like any other business. The Port Authority is going to own it. So ultimately the Port Authority is going to be the one, holding the bag there or being responsible for it. So obviously we will work with our insurance providers to make sure that we are covered to the extent that we need to be covered.
Now, typically with these events, parents will sign disclaimers too. So, I mean, that does mitigate, but we will have a general liability policy in place, and that's all part of the pro forma.
Okay. And will the city be left financially responsible should this project fail?
Well, the answer is yes. So the city is guaranteeing the debt. So, whether or not they would choose to try to pay that debt off if the facility fails early, or if they would just continue to use the distributions from the foundation itself to service the debt, then the city would be responsible for paying that debt if the port cannot contribute. The only thing I would, make as an assertion there to sort of mitigate some of that risk is that, at the end of this too, there's still this facility that's built. And so whether or not that can be repurposed and sold for something else, that would also then be able to, because there's going to be part of this is there's going to be a mortgage on this building. So it's not like, the port owns it free and clear and we can go do whatever we want with it. If something happens and the building needs to be sold or used for other purposes, any money generated from that type of sale would have to be used to satisfy that debt.
And then can the location be used for business events? So like from a chamber perspective, we're always looking for someplace to hold our forecast breakfast or our annual meeting or a business expo or a job fair. Is that something that like during the weekdays, it would be available for the chamber to rent or another business?
Yes, it is. We have actually purposefully made that part of our design process to make sure that we have whatever, systems we need in place to support that.
Okay. Is there a boardroom or anything where you can have executive meetings or staff retreats that could be rented out as well?
Sort of, yeah. We do have a room, but that's one of the pieces of the design that's currently in flux. So we're trying to draw a I don't know, a balance between the amount of space we have available for like concessions and seating for people that are eating their food, and the amount of space we have available for office space. We don't want to build out a whole bunch of office space and, you know, spend a whole bunch of money that we're never going to use, you know, if we're not going to use it. But we do want to have an area where, you know, people could come in and work if they need to, or perhaps we could have meetings, or heck, even have the Port Authority meetings there. It'd be great. But, you know, there is a space currently that's sort of a multi-function room that we could use. And I don't know, I don't remember what the square footage is on that. Gary, do you remember off the top
Yeah,
of
I
your head?
do. Just to kind of give everybody a visual of it, if you can think of the side room at Pizza Hut, it's about just about that size. It can hold up to 40 people. And part of our revenue and our pro forma needs that room for birthday parties and rental space. So it's there.
Okay. And the last question we're gonna go through this morning, because I know on time, how did this transfer from a project that started with the partnership to the development of a Port Authority, to the Port Authority being the owner of this project once it's completed?
I think it was the intent all along. I mean, the partnership's role as a county economic development is to be a connector. I've had many people ask me as I serve in that capacity, you know, how do you do this? And I kind of look at it like being a parent with multiple kids. You try to focus on what those kids' talents are and put them into a position to be successful. And as I look at New Washington and Crestline and Galion and Bucyrus, they all have unique selling propositions. Galion has the Freese Fund. So it makes sense that this discussion has always been focused on Galion, but it originated in the Crawford 2020, which was a countywide initiative to figure out how we're going to make some changes. And that all started in 08 after the housing bust and the large recession we had then. And it was written into the quality of life because it brought people to the area to create a venue along US 30. And I instantly connected that dot. Tom had shared with me the Freese Foundation, which previously had been used to get us out of fiscal emergency, but was moving in a direction of being an asset to the community. So, you know, that's when the discussion started. We were very involved with the city. I mean, we shared costs. That USDA grant partnership bared a cost. The city bared a cost because there was some local commitment, which brought in about $39,500 to get that USDA grant. But the timing was right that the port would be created. I think that was Tom's general intention the whole time, was to create a port authority, and he got it done. And so the port's in existence. The grants that I mentioned, the Timken and the Community Foundation, those originated from applications at the partnership. It was put into a special account. That money has been transferred short of $10,000 some odd $100 to the Port Authority. So it's been a partnership. That's what it's been. We can do this together. Things can work together. It doesn't have to be Varsity Jacket. It can be Crawford County. It can even be Richland, Wyandotte in Crawford counties. Let's face it. We're competing against Columbus, Cleveland, and Cincinnati, and this is our chance to take US 30 and make this area thriving. We have the genetics for it. Crawford and Richland area, I mean, they were the Delaware counties in the 40s and 50s. So it's a step back in that direction. I think we have the opportunity to do that. So excited that it's in the port's hands. It's a great group. Tom's nominated great people. City Council has approved them. And hopefully we've answered a lot of questions. There's a lot of work that's been done. This isn't just a hope and a dream. I mean, there is legitimate work that's been done. Is it perfect? No, life's not perfect. Like I said, we got an end vision with multiple lanes. There's a couple lanes we don't even know about right now, but they'll probably open up with discussions like this, and that's the good thing.
All right. If anybody, for the sake of time, has any questions that we did not get to today, and I'm sorry, this has been great. I did put Gary, Chad, and myself's emails in the chat, so feel free to reach out to any of us. We are doing this again at 8 o'clock tonight. The registration is still under the 100 capacity, so if you want to go ahead, if you have a question, you want to tune back in, please register for it. We will record these and it will go out in our newsletter tomorrow. So if that's it, we are going to sign off and we'll see some people back at 8 o'clock tonight. Thank you, Chad. Thank you, Gary. We really appreciate this.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.